The wind at that height carried a sound like no other. A hollow whistle that slid across the cliffs and made the ropes hum faintly. I'll never forget the first night we decided to camp right on the ledge. It wasn't a plan so much as a challenge between friends, the kind that starts as a joke and somehow grows legs of its own. We'd been climbing the east face of Ironback Mountain all day, a sheer wall of weathered granite that caught the afternoon sun like burnished steel. By dusk, our arms were shaking from fatigue, and our water bottles were light. But the idea of sleeping suspended hundreds of feet above the valley was too thrilling to pass up. We found a narrow ledge, just wide enough for 2 portaledges and a small cooking area we'd rig with slings. The last of the sun poured through a notch in the ridgeline, staining the rock orange and the valley below in a dusky purple haze. I remember the smell of lichen and stone, the sharpness of the cold air that comes just after sunset. Below us, the forest looked soft and endless, like a sea of green waves frozen mid-motion. We worked mostly in silence, part focus, part reverence. Every carabiner click echoed louder than it should have. Every gust of wind carried the distant call of some unseen bird. When our little camp was finally in place, I eased into my sling seat and looked out over the edge. The horizon had swallowed the sun completely, and only the faint shimmer of the river far below showed where the world ended. My friend Nate cracked open the freeze-dried dinner, and we shared it straight from the pouch, laughing about how much it tasted like cardboard and success. The stars came on one by one, so sharp and close, they looked like they might slice the fabric of the sky. I should have felt secure. We'd double-checked knots, anchors, the works. But some part of my mind kept tracing the sheer drop just inches from my boots. When I shifted, I could hear tiny bits of gravel tumble away into the darkness, never hitting bottom. I imagined them falling for miles, swallowed by the wind. The hum of the cliff, the whisper of the night air, the smell of cold granite, it all pressed close until sleep felt like stepping off an edge itself. That first sitting cross-legged on his portaledge, headlamp off, staring out into the blackness. "You hear that?" he asked quietly, voice barely above the wind. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I wanted to admit it. But that altitude, everything feels amplified. Even the faintest echo crawls along the rock like a whisper. I swung my light toward the face above us, catching the shimmer of our ropes and the jagged cracks that ran through the wall. Nothing moved. But then came a faint clink, the sound of a loose pebble skipping down the cliff. Then another. The mountain was shedding tiny bits of itself, one grain at a time. We both knew what that meant. Rockfall. "Helmets," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We crouched low against the rock, tightening our harnesses as another stone rattled past. It wasn't a major slide, not yet, but you never really know when those small shifts will give way to something heavier. The darkness made it impossible to tell where the noise came from. I could feel the vibration in my palms pressed against the stone, a kind of deep tremor that came and went like the pulse of the mountain. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The air went still again, leaving only the hiss of the wind through the valley. My headlamp caught Nate's face, white with dust, but grinning. "Guess the old girl was just stretching," he muttered. We both laughed, half from nerves, half from relief. After that, sleep was harder to come by. I lay there listening to the mountain breathe, wind sighing across the ledges, ropes ticking faintly with every shift of weight. I thought about all the climbers who'd slept in places like this before us, dangling between earth and sky, trusting their lives to knots and metal. There was something humbling in it, like being a guest on the edge of another world. Sometime after midnight, the moon rose over the far ridge, pale and distant. Its light caught the mist drifting up from the forest, turning it silver. The world below sky. The next, you're inside a roaring machine of wind and water. The air tasted electric, dry and metallic. I cinched the fly tighter around the ledge, clipped in my backup tether, and double-checked the anchor points. The wind slammed into us again, a wall of air so strong it made the cords groan. Rain followed, the kind that doesn't fall so much as fly sideways. It lashed across our faces, stung through the thin nylon. I couldn't tell if it was rain or mist from the clouds themselves. We were high enough that the difference didn't matter. Lightning flashed somewhere above, and for a split second, the whole cliffside glowed white. I saw the valley far below, the trees bending like blades of grass. Then darkness again. We shouted to each other just to be heard. "How bad do you think it'll get?" I yelled. Nate only shrugged, gripping his rope. Water streamed off the edge of his fly like a waterfall. Every few seconds, a burst of thunder rolled through the air so close it felt like it came from inside my chest. I remember thinking how small we were, two tiny specks clinging to a sliver of stone, while the world threw everything it had at us. The storm didn't just pass over, it stayed, coiling around the mountain. The wind swung our ledges like pendulums. My pack banged against the rock, sending echoes down the wall. Somewhere below, I heard what might have been another rockfall, drowned by the rain and thunder. My hands ached from gripping the straps too tightly. Hours blurred together in that chaos. I focused on the small things, checking knots, counting seconds between lightning and thunder, breathing slow. Somewhere in the noise, Nate started laughing. "You wanted an adventure," he shouted, rain dripping off his nose. I couldn't help it. I laughed too. The fear cracked, replaced by something raw and exhilarating. Then, as dawn began to creep up from behind the storm, the wind eased. The mountain went quiet again, except for the steady drip of water and the occasional shudder of rope. We were soaked, cold to the bone, but still there, still hanging. The first light broke through the clouds in thin golden streaks, painting the cliff in colour again. It felt like the world was giving us back our place. Little did we know, the real test was still waiting for us once the sun came up. Known. Steam rose into the cool air, mingling with the scent of wet stone and lichen. For a while we didn't speak. We just sat there, legs dangling over hundreds of feet of open space, soaking in the kind of peace that only comes after chaos. The world seemed newly scrubbed, alive again. Condensation ran down the granite in silver threads, pooling on the ledge before dripping into the void. Every droplet fell so far it felt like it should echo when it hit the valley floor. From this height, even the river below looked still, a ribbon of glass twisting through the green. But peace on a mountainside never lasts long. When we started packing up to descend, Nate noticed one of our main anchors, an old expansion bolt someone had placed decades ago, was wobbly. Not loose enough to fail, but not right either. The storm had worked it loose. My stomach tightened as I leaned in close to inspect it. The rock around it had a small crack spidering outward. We set a backup anchor, whispering the kind of calm reassurance climbers use when they're both trying not to say what they're thinking. "It'll hold," Nate said. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. We worked slowly, checking each carabiner, each sling, every knot. My hands were still trembling, not from fear now, but the leftover energy of a night that had pushed both body and mind to their limit. By mid-morning, the sky had cleared completely. You'd never guess a storm had passed through. The sun warmed the rock beneath our palms, drying the ropes one thread at a time. Below us, the air shimmered like water. It almost felt safe again. Almost. When we began our rappel down the face, I went first. The rope slid through my hands, smooth and rhythmic, the sound of nylon against metal whispering in my ears. Every few feet, I'd glance up, make sure Nate was still steady above. At the halfway point, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp soil, an invitation from the world below. That's heart's still pounding, but the world goes quiet. I could hear the tiny scrape of my rope against the granite, the slow rhythm of my breath, and somewhere far below, the faint murmur of the river. My fingers burned as I eased downward again, each motion careful, deliberate. The rock felt alive under my palms, solid but breathing, as if reminding me that trust on a cliffside is always conditional. When my boots finally touched ground, I almost didn't believe it. My legs wobbled, half from exhaustion, half from the rush of being earthbound again. I unclipped, stepped back, and looked up at the cliff that had held us through the storm and the night. Nate came down a few minutes later, moving slower than usual. When he hit the ground, he just sat down in the grass and started laughing. It wasn't joy exactly. More relief. More disbelief. I joined him, and for a long while we just sat there. Two specks of dust who'd danced with gravity and somehow walked away. As we packed our soaked gear, the mountain loomed over us in the morning light, calm and indifferent. It didn't feel hostile anymore, just vast. We talked about the anchor, about how we'd double our backups next time, how lucky we'd been. But deep down, I think both of us knew that luck had little to do with it. It was awareness, respect, the instinct that keeps you listening when the mountain speaks. On the hike out, the wind still whispered across the ridges, soft as a sigh. Every few steps I'd glance back at that cliff, our temporary home in the clouds. It stood there, unbothered, scarred by time and storm. And I felt a strange kind of gratitude. That ledge, that night, that thin thread between safety and the void. They'd carved something into me. Now, whenever I pitch my tent on level ground, I still feel that pull, that hum beneath the earth. The memory of sleeping on the edge reminds me that comfort is a gift, not a guarantee. And every time